Good evening and welcome to Jazz Tales for this, actually it should have been the February 10th edition, but we're at February 17th edition. Thank you to everyone who stuck with us and was understanding of, we were in the middle of sound check last week and literally everything just went dark. And they said it would come back on by 6:50, obviously it didn't, but we were able to make it work, so I'm so thankful that everyone could join us. I'm happy, really happy to have with me this evening a person I've known for a long time. Just a wonderful person, a wonderful musician, and I'm speaking of guitarist Steve Abshire. Let me tell you a little bit about Steve. Steve has appeared in concert twice with the great guitars in the 1980s with Ellis and Charlie Byrd, filling in for Barney Kessel, and more recently with Bucky, Pizzarelli and Frank Vignola. He can be found on numerous recordings, including 6 of his own. His first release in 1987, Big Brass Bed Blues, received a 4.5-star rating from Downbeat Magazine, which called him fluent, assured, directly communicative, and definitely one to watch. His most recent project, Between Friends, is a collaboration with longtime friend and master guitarist Steve Herberman. It is a collection of musical conversations between two good friends released on the Mainstay Music Label. Steve was a member of various Navy bands for 24 years. He landed the position of guitarist and featured soloist with the Commodores, the U.S. Navy's premier jazz ensemble, for 18 of those years until he retired in 1997. As a member of the Commodores, Steve performed twice at the famed Jazz and Marciac Festival in Marciac, France. He was a member of the faculty at Levine School of Music in Washington, D.C. for 5 years and presently teaches guitar privately as a clinician. Steve has given master classes in guitar, rhythm section techniques at Armed Forces School of Music, James Madison University, Elan University, and various colleges and high schools in the region. It's my pleasure to welcome Steve Abshire. Steve, welcome. It's so great to have you here this evening.
It is great to be with you, Fred. Thank you.
I'm glad we could make it work.
Yeah, man.
And you know, last week it was 24 years since you had retired, right?
Yes,
to the day.
Yes, I had retired February 10th, 1997.
Wow.
And I woke up that morning, I said, wow, I was in for 24 and now I've been out for 24.
Wow.
And it was just an interesting feeling. So I was thinking, oh, this is going to be great because I get the chance to do this with you, and then the power went out. So we sat in the dark for a little while and then decided we'll do it this week.
I'm glad that we could make it happen this week. And we're going to get started tonight with a tune called
I Won't Dance.
There we go.
Jerome Kern.
There we go.
All right, let's see.
Welcome, everyone.
Yeah.
Yeah, gentlemen. And I forgot to mention Paul. Although our hip crowd here, they, you know, Ed said, and hi to Paul too. So let me go back and say hi to everyone. Steve and Laurie up in Easton, Pennsylvania, welcome. Lou and Janet up in Nutley, New Jersey, welcome. Ed in Washington, D.C., great seeing you all. Glad that you could join us. And yes, we're happy to have Paul here with us as well. There's a lot of music here and a lot of things to talk about too. So let's just keep playing. Next we've got Doxy, right? Sonny Rollins. Sonny Rollins. Yeah, folks, I was so excited about playing with these two wonderful gentlemen that I had forgot to push that little button on the bottom. And of course, when we started to play the song, I pushed it for a second. So you all were right on there. Yes, you all had it guessed right, exactly how it went. I promise I will try and step on that thing the next time. Thank you so much. Pete Magoon, good to see you. Pete is trombone player in the Columbia Jazz Band. So good to see you.
Cool.
And honors jazz band performing on the Eiffel Tower in Paris. Steve, 1972?
Yes, Pete and I were both in the same, let's see, this would have been the, I'm trying to remember the whole, it was a jazz group, but it was made up of, it was the honors band, high school.
Yes, it says Montgomery County High School Honors Jazz Band.
That's it.
Yeah.
That's it. I remember Pete.
Wow.
In fact, I remember doing a little bit of a film clip with Pete at the rear end, the back part of Notre Dame.
Wow.
And I'm sure Pete remembers that too. It was pretty out there. But we had a good time.
Probably we should stop the story here.
I think so. I think I will. I'll stop right there.
All right. Well, next we have a tune by Joe Henderson. This is called Recordame.
nothing like looking at the neck wrong.
Well, we have several people. Well, first of all, Pete said Quasimodo.
Well, yeah, I wasn't going to say that, but yeah, that's what it was. It was in a back courtyard, yes.
Girls from Mars says, hi to Steve
Hi,
from
Wendy.
Wendy Bourne. Great
Hi,
to
Wendy.
see and hear you.
Thank you.
And Doug Adams says, Doug and Hilda Adams from Lewis, Delaware, Jazz Dinner Theater. How nice.
Nice.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Terrific.
would agree. Such a pleasure to have you gentlemen here this evening. We're going to jump into the interview section, but before we do, I need to thank two sponsors for this evening's show. We have Lori Winnick and Steve Aragona up in Easton, Pennsylvania, who have sponsored this evening's episode, along with Bangert Piano, Rob Bangert, who takes care of my instrument and your piano as well, right?
What?
You have a piano as well that he
he
was your
has
son.
He has a son that I teach guitar to.
Right, that's right. I knew there was a connection
Yes,
there. But
yes.
both Laurie and Steve and Rob and Bangert Piano have sponsored this evening's
Very nice.
episode. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Well, those of you that are with us all the time know that I ask this very first question to everyone that comes through the door here. And it ties in with our mission of bringing this music to our young people. And I think it's important for our young listeners that either see this, and I'll talk a little bit about that later in the show, but to know what it is that we as musicians got us started. So I asked the same question. What is that one thing or several things that happened early in your career or that got you started with music, and more importantly, jazz?
Well, I I grew up in a family that loved music. My parents had a huge record collection, and my father was also in the Navy. He wasn't a musician. He had a desk job, but in 1962 we were stationed in Turkey, and about 100 miles south of Istanbul, and there was no television, there was no radio, there was no telephone. So at night, we'd listen to records. And at the time, I was about 10 years old, I guess. And I would listen anywhere from hearing Broadway, like Fiorello or Unsinkable Molly Brown, to listening to Count Basie, to listening to Strauss waltzes. I mean, just my folks put on everything. And at that time, my father had this collection of what they were called Phase 4 albums. They were put out by a company, London was the record company. And he had a humongous collection, and then among those was a recording or a record of Les Paul. And it was Les Paul Now is what it was called. And it was all of the hits that he had done with Mary Ford, except minus the vocals. He filled in all the parts, and he was the master of multi-tracking, because he's really the one that got it started. And I think I about wore the grooves off that record, because I'd listen to it all the time. And plus, at about that same time, I have an older brother and sister, and my brother had discovered the Ventures. So now you're talking a rock and roll group, 2 guitars, bass, and drums. And I really liked that as well. So that was probably what got me started with guitar. To move forward a decade or two, I was in the Navy. I was playing in several rock bands and Latin bands. I played in a funk band for a while, had a great time, enjoyed all of that. And I ended up, getting stationed in Annapolis at the Naval Academy Band. And at that point, they didn't tell me this ahead of time, but at that point, the first day I checked in, they assigned me a guitar. I didn't have time to open it, to look at it until I got home that evening. And I opened it, and it was a guitar similar to this one. It was a Gibson Johnny Smith, which for guitar players would know, ooh, that's nice. It had on a set of dead flat wound strings. I tuned it up and went, I went, oh, I like this. I like the sound of this. I like the feel of this. So it was this kind of, you know, that kind of sound. And I thought, ooh, I think I'm going to change what I do right now. Wow. And so I kind of did a complete 180 with all the pedals I used to use. And it would take me 35, 40 minutes to get all this junk set up in the old days. From that, I went to just plugging a guitar in an amp and never looked back.
Wow.
So, yeah, it really made a huge impact on me. And so, yeah, I'll stop at that because I could go on, but, you know.
Wow, that's very interesting. Yeah.
Anyway, yeah, that's really what happened. So I'm grateful to my folks for that sort of thing because it really did make a difference. And a lot of Louis Armstrong, Ella Fitzgerald, all the things they did together with the Oscar Peterson Trio, loved it, man. Listened to it all the time.
Wow.
And it kind of sunk in there. I wasn't playing an instrument at the time, but it was all kind of getting recorded back in there. And as I started playing, I said, well, I've heard this melody before. And it started figuring things out. So that's really where it all came from.
Wow, wonderful story.
Yeah.
Well, we'll continue on the next segment, but back to playing. This is a Buster Williams tune.
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah, Takudo.
Takudo, yes.
This is actually one that Paul taught me.
Huh.
You didn't know that, did you? Yeah, this was, Paul and I played for a long time at a place in Columbia called the Stanford Grill. And he called it one night, and I said, ooh, I don't know this. So I learned it, and it's really a cool blues.
It is, yeah.
Takudo. So.
Lots of fun.
Yeah.
Steve says, you guys sound great.
Oh,
Thank you, Steve.
Well, thank you.
Appreciate it. Next, we're going to do a beautiful ballad, Hoagie Carmichael and Johnny Mercer,
yeah.
composed in 1941. Skylark. Beautiful, too.
Yeah, I was wondering if we were going to go for the Picardy third or not.
Well, I was thinking about it, but you know, because I was.
Yeah.
I felt like it needed to stay, but
yeah, it was cool. It was cool.
Well, this next section we want to talk about mentors.
Okay.
I know that there's people that come into our lives that just really help us on a path, and I know that you said you had several that you'd thought about. But
Yes. Well, the first one, when you asked me that question last week, said you were going to ask me, the first person who popped into mind was a gentleman that I met when I was a student at the Armed Forces School of Music. And his name was Ray Corcoran. And I had Ray for the first 2 periods of every day. I had a combo class. And the combo class basically was made up of a rhythm section and I think 1 horn player. It could have been 2, but it was mainly, I remember, piano, guitar, bass, and drums. And Ray was one of these guys that at one point had played trumpet. So he understood the horn angle of things, but he had taken up piano and also drums. And he was one of those guys, I'd show up for class, and sometimes I was the first one there. And I'd see him sitting at a Fender Rhodes, and he's playing these changes, and he's going, and he always called me Ab, what do you think of this? And he'd play something, he said, what would you do with that? So he wouldn't tell me what key he's in or anything. He'd let me figure that out. And then when the other guys would show up, he'd start playing this, and he'd say, what do you hear with this? And he really got me to thinking about how to listen for what's going on around me, not just being in my own little thing. I mean, there are times when you have to really focus on what you're doing, and it's obvious to me that sometimes I didn't do that tonight. But, you know, that being said, he would have me listen for everything that was going on. And then he would hop over on the drums and he'd start playing a particular beat, and he'd say, what do you hear with that? And he'd say, how do you connect with the bass player? How do you connect with the piano? And then there was a horn player playing, so how do you play under this guy and not over top of him? And so I was really, really appreciative of that class, because it was the course was about 6 months long.
Right.
And it's equivalent to like a freshman year of college. And it was fabulous. I mean, the other class, I had theory class, I had other things, and that was cool. It was all good. But that combo class, man, I get up every morning to get ready for that, because it was really
cool.
great. It was great. Ray Corcoran was a prince, man.
Wow.
He really influenced me a lot.
Well, I was a tuba player at the Armed Forces School of Music, so my experience there was not like that.
Okay. And when were you there?
79.
79.
Yeah.
Okay. I was there in 73.
Yeah.
So yeah, those long hallways with the little window on the door and the practice.
But you know, I've heard
rooms.
stories of some of the, especially the Navy instructors that were there. If you were a combo or a jazz player, everybody just said it was the hippest time ever. But yeah, as a tuba player, it was all different. But I was only there for a month. I advanced out. So
Oh, okay,
I was,
okay.
Yeah, but interesting. Yeah.
Well, at the time also, I had a bass. I still have it. As a matter of fact, I got it in 1969. One of those Hofner Beetle basses, and I took that with me. And there were times when I'd walk down a hall and they'd have these different not combo classes, but like a big band going on, and they didn't have a bass player, and they'd see me say, "Come on in, Ed, come on in." So I'd walk in and set up, and put my bass on and start playing these. I didn't play charts because, frankly, I couldn't read bass clef in those days. In fact, I couldn't read very well at all, and I would just ask for the chord chart, and then start playing these lines that would fit. And I remember one of the tunes that was really fun to play. Do you remember the TV show Mannix?
Oh,
yeah. Yeah. Well, there was yeah, it was a very cool theme song. Well, one of the staff arrangers there at the school had done a great big band arrangement of it, and so I always enjoyed when we played that, because I got a chance, to swing some stuff.
Sure.
And it was just great. And sometimes I'd be playing guitar in those classes, but I enjoyed the bass playing just as much, because again, what to listen for,
Right.
So I was really grateful for that.
That's such a wonderful experience. I mean, to
It
me,
really was.
that says it all right there. What do
Yeah.
you hear?
Yeah.
And rather than, there's obviously different ways of approaching teaching. But
Sure.
that one of just like, what do you hear? What is
Yeah.
that?
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that brings me to another mentor of mine, who was Herb Ellis, who I met in April of 1978 at the King of France Tavern at the Maryland Inn in Annapolis. And I remember, because I caught a lot of guitar players there when I was, because at this time I was about 23, 24 years old. And just starting to learn about, trying to play jazz. And I'd go see these guys. I saw Joe Pass there. I'd see Charlie Byrd there. I saw Barney Kessel. I remember the first time I saw Barney Kessel, I was so knocked out with that I went back over to the band room, because this was in Annapolis, and it was about 3 miles away.
Right.
And I got in the band room, got my guitar out, and just played. Just tried practicing and remembering things I heard him do till about 3:30 in the morning. And it was really cool just to be able to hear these guys. But the first time I heard Herb, I went, oh, that's what hits me. Because it was his time feel, but also that bluesy kind of feel. He would put some of that in things, and I went, oh, I like that. So I went up to him on a break, and I was sitting in the front. They had a bar and the stage, and it was probably a little closer than you and I are, Fred. And I'd sit there and just react to everything I heard him playing. So, he could see me, and I couldn't help it. I'm like, oh, yeah, man, woo. And so on the break, I went up to him and asked if he had any time for any lessons. He said, yeah, man, I saw you out there in the audience, in the crowd. And yeah, sure, come on up tonight. So I went up to his room after he was finished, and I didn't have my guitar, but there were 2 beds in the room, and he'd sit on one bed and I'm sitting on the other, and he'd play something, and he'd say, here, now you try it. He'd hand me his guitar, and he'd show, no, it's just like that. So he's showing me these things, and my head's going, wow, this is so cool. And I was there till about 2 in the morning, and just hanging out with him. And then from then on, for about the next 15 years, every time he'd show up anywhere, D.C., Annapolis, Baltimore, I was going to be there. Whether it was solo thing he was doing, like a trio thing, or great guitars, or just with Barney Kessel or whomever. And so, yeah, he really influenced me a lot. And one other person I do want to mention, who was a rhythm guitarist, who was a guy who played with a lot of people. He lived in Gaithersburg at the time. This would have been in the early 80s, 80, 81, was a rhythm guitarist by the name of Steve Jordan. And the reason I say rhythm guitar, he never played a single line thing. You know, but he would play, and I've got this other guitar we'll get out in a minute, but he'd sit and play things and just, he sounded like a locomotive.
Right.
Just chunk, and man, his time was so good. He was with Benny Goodman, he was with Stan Kenton. He played with a lot of folks, and all these, heavy-duty names that right now none of them are coming to mind. But anyway, he was another one who was just cool to hang out with. And like, I'd go over to his house, and he'd put on George Van Epps records. And we both, that's the first time I was introduced to Van Epps. You know, I'd never heard him before.
Right.
And I'm listening to him, and I'm thinking, how can this guy do this? And I look over at Steve, and he's got the same look on his face. How does this guy do this? You know, so it was just kind of cool to be able to be exposed rather to all of these different folks like that.
Wow.
And I feel really, really blessed that I had the chance to do that.
That's wonderful.
And I love passing that stuff on. So all of my students always get to hear stories about these guys.
Yeah.
'Cause, you know,
I mean, Herb Ellis to do that, you know?
Yeah.
You know, there's certain guys that as soon as they're done playing, you
Yeah.
can't find them.
Yeah.
You're lucky if you can see them actually leaving the club. So.
Right, right.
Wow. That's
Right.
that's an amazing. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, man.
Yeah. Well, let's play again.
Okay.
I thought about you.
Oh, yeah.
Jimmy Van Heusen, Johnny
Jimmy
Mercer.
Van Heusen, yeah. Just want to make sure, I feel like I'm... This is a great tune, and I love playing it as a waltz. So we're going to do it in 6/8.
just like we rehearsed it.
Yeah.
Peter Kaufman in Annapolis says, "What a superb trio!" Thank you, Peter. Appreciate it. And Girls from Mars says, "Oh my, OMG!
Oh my
This
goodness.
interview
Yep.
is fabulous."
Wow, that's very nice.
And so is the music. Wow, I appreciate that. Well, while you switch guitars there,
Oh yes, that's right. It's time for me to do that.
let me just explain a second here. And I was so very happy that Steve said that he would do this, and he volunteered. I didn't ask, but I was hoping that he would explain. I think that Steve is one of the foremost rhythm guitar players that really understands and gets the sound, and it's a pleasure playing with him. The groove is just right where it needs to be. It's so much fun. And he said he was going to bring a guitar specifically for explaining this whole rhythm guitar thing, a la Freddie Green. And so I'm glad that you did. You have a few things you'd like to say before we jump into this tune?
Well, I was just going to say that guitar that I've been playing is actually 60 years old.
Wow.
This guitar is 84 years old. And this belonged to a very dear friend of mine who, Gene Roberts was his name. And I used to go hang out at Gene's house. I mean, he was a retired chemist. And he bought this guitar new, so in 1937. So it was one of those kind of things that we just go and hang out, and he would come to gigs that I had, trio things or whatever. But once he passed away, his daughter contacted me, Sharon, and said that Gene wanted me to have this. And I was blown away. So basically they gave me the instrument. And the first gig that I used this on was the 100th birthday of Count Basie. That was at the Kennedy Center. And it was one of those Millennium stage gigs. And so I used this thing, and it sounded great. I'm just sitting there having a ball, and the leader looks over at me like, "You want to take a solo?" I looked at him, "Are you kidding?" No, I'm happy doing what I'm doing. So I just did that all night. So yeah, this thing is great. It's just it's the way they made these instruments. It's an arched top and a back, just like the L5. They're both L5s, but just like the 61 L5. The way this works is the higher you can raise the strings and still play it, the louder it'll get. And that reminds me of a story, if we have time for me to. It was the first time I went and saw the Basie Band live. Long story short, the drummer, Duffy Jackson, had just played with the Commodores, with the Navy Band Commodores. So we went to see them at Gaithersburg High School. And I was allowed to go backstage. They let me come up and go backstage to meet Freddie Green, which was a thrill. But as I passed the piano, rather, he had taken the guitar because the lid was off. He had taken his guitar and just sat it in the piano. And I did a triple take looking at the string height, because not only was this end, the nut, sitting up like this, the bridge was up. I took my hand and passed between the strings and the fingerboard and didn't touch either one.
My. Wow.
And he's the only man on the planet that could play that guitar. And I'm just so glad that I shook his right hand and not his left, because he could probably crush a Volkswagen with that hand, you know. So it was amazing. But he got sound out of that thing. I went and saw them once at the Wolf Trap, and a sound engineer had just put a little microphone on a stand right in front of Freddie's chair. And Freddie walks out and looks at that, and he takes it and turns the mic at the audience. And he sat down and played. I could hear him just fine. You know, there are times when you hear a guitar in a big band, and there are times when you don't hear it. You just feel it. And that's the thing. Freddie Green really defined rhythm guitar playing.
Wow.
And so I didn't mean to go off on a tangent
Oh, no,
about that,
I'm
but
glad that you
it's
did.
just that it's really cool. So anyway, yeah, we were going to do In a Mellow Tone.
In a mellow tone, yes.
And just to I'm playing it real lightly right now. I mean, this guitar, the louder the band is, the more fun it is just to pound it. and the guitar just says, "Go ahead, I don't care," and it just produces a sound that won't quit. So
Wow.
it's just, for me, it's just
Right.
a blast.
Well, we were just going to let you play the first half of the tune.
Okay.
Just so everyone can just hear that
Okay.
sound, and
Okay.
it's a beautiful sound. Thank
Okay,
you for doing
all
that.
right. Yeah, definitely. Paul and I will do that.
Yes, I'm sorry.
Yeah. You don't want to hear me by myself. You got to hear some bass with it. So. That's fun.
Steve, man.
Yes.
Yes. It's so great to hear you do that.
Oh,
thank you.
thank you.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
We've got some people to thank here again. I'd like to thank our sponsors for this evening. I'd like to thank Lori Winnick and Steve Aragona up in Easton, Pennsylvania, and Bangor Piano in Pasadena, Maryland. Thank you for sponsoring tonight's episode of Jazz Tales. We appreciate it. We'd also like to talk about 3 students that are joining us this evening and the folks that made that possible. I'd like to thank Janet and Lou Russo in Nutley, New Jersey for sponsoring Isabella Bonilla, a trumpet player from Nutley, New Jersey, who's in the high school jazz band, wind ensemble, and marching band. We'd like to thank Sherry and John Zimmerman in Mechanicsburg, Pennsylvania, who have sponsored Colin Smith here in Easton, Maryland, who's a beginning guitar and keyboard player.
Ah,
Thank you,
very
John
good.
and Sherry.
Yes.
And, whoops, sorry. Wrong button. And we'd like to thank Netta and David Aragona in Montville, New Jersey for sponsoring Max Lensick, a baritone sax player in Nutley, New Jersey, who's a member of the Nutley High School Jazz Ensemble and Wind Ensemble. And lastly, we would like to thank the Talbot County Arts Council, who has sponsored this first half of 2021 for the Easton High School Jazz Ensemble to watch all of the Jazz Tales episode.
Nice.
So we'd like to welcome Mr. E.J. Osterly and his band to the program and thank the Talbot County Arts Council so very much for their sponsorship of our programming. Thank you so much, folks. Steve, it always happens this way that we get to a point where we're just pretty much out of time, but we still have a number or two that we'd like to play.
Okay.
But before we go, is there any advice that you'd like to give to our students that are watching?
Oh,
folks
my
that
goodness.
are watching?
Well, be patient. Be patient with yourself. Be patient with your development. And above all things, well, two things come to mind. One, like I was talking about, listening. If you're in a horn ensemble, like a trumpet ensemble, listen to the lead player. Match, blend with them. Make sure that your sound when you're playing in an ensemble blends. It doesn't stick out. It doesn't get lost. It should just be in there, mixed in with it. For guitar, for the young man who is playing guitar, so many students want all their sound to come from their amp. And if you're playing a solid body, I understand that you have to a certain degree. But if you're playing something that has any sound to it itself, you want to play in such a way that your sound comes up to the level of the ensemble. And in doing that, if you turn down and you dig in a little more, that energy that you're playing that way, the energy that you're putting into playing will come and add to the group, as opposed to if you're playing too loud, you're kind of coming down on top of the sound, and it really throws things off. It'll never feel comfortable, and you'll never blend in. Blending, listening, being patient, and just enjoy it. Music is an awesome gift.
Wow.
So
Well
enjoy.
said. Well said. Thank you so much, Steve.
Mm-hmm.
Pete Magoon says, sounds of joy. Yes.
Amen.
Thank you.
That's it.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So, realistically, we only have time for one more.
Okay.
Which would you like that to be? I mean, obviously, if everybody says they want to hear more, we'll play the two tunes that we have. But if we're only going to do one, which one would you want to do?
How about if we end with Avalon?
Okay.
Yeah, let's do that. 'cause
All right. Then
wanna
this is a
feature-
tune by Vincent Rose,
Yes.
Buddy DeSilva, and Al Jolson,
Yes.
composed in 1920, called Avalon.
And this is going to feature Fred playing the melody, because Fred has been so kind and patient, let me play all these heads all night, but Fred needs to play one. So
No,
we're
that's
gonna
okay,
do
but
that.
thank you.
Yeah, man. greet.
Steve, it's been a pleasure having you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Fred. Thank you for the opportunity. This is great.
Yes, my pleasure.
What you're doing is terrific.
Thank you.
And thank you for doing it.
Oh, thank you for being a part of it, both of you. Thank you, Paul. Let me put that screen up there. Yeah. Paul, thank you so much. Appreciate it. Appreciate it. Oh, folks, really a great time this evening. Thank you so much for your very kind words. Next week, we have vocalist Imani Gonzalez. She'll be here with us. And joining her will be her husband on bass, Pepe Gonzalez. Those of you that are subscribers know Pepe was our first guest in the first quarter of this year. So Pepe will be here. Actually, he's driving her here because she doesn't like driving at night. But then I roped him into playing as well. So it'll be great having them both here. Thank you so much. We'll see you next week. Have a great week, folks.